you've been spending this whole time learning about the Patriots, how James Johnson, the best president in history, um, after he gropes you, he tells you that they run the whole show, including the election, that this is all farce. But you have no idea the mechanisms of their control.
Mm-hmm.
When you meet Emma tells you a lot of stuff, and this is getting into the territory of why this game is considered uniquely prophetic.
Mm.
Emma is the first one who tells you the information warfare control mechanisms of the Patriots, of the true weapon that is being fostered underneath the big shell facility, the GWAI. She uses as an example of the Patriots and GW's information control mechanisms. She uses an example the human genome. She reveals to Raiden that there are actually something like almost twice as many sequences in the human genome as was revealed. Raiden is adamant. He says, no, scientists and organizations, they said it's that many. And Emma goes, did you talk to them? Do you know anything? Did you sequence it yourself? Did you count the entire thing? Mm-hmm. And she's just using that as an example of how easy it is if you just control things around the margins, which is, she states, explicitly the purpose of GW. GW's purpose is not to control all information. It is not as explicit as, 1984. It is not, we've always been at war with Eurasia, whatever. It is the marginal control of information, but the real mechanism that the Patriots control information is through social contagion. Emma explains that all personal computers distributed have kernels of this information control mechanism, so that information that the Patriots want disseminated or want not to be disseminated can be explicitly tapered around the margins by people's communications with each other through computers. This is way more explosive than anything that has been hinted at in Metal Gear Solid 1 or in this game previously about the inner workings of the world. And Emma's character specifically, and we're going to learn that these echoes and these people who fit these archetypes or roles of Shadow Moses, this is not at all an accident. Her role as Hal's sister is so interesting because Hal is presented as he comes from a long line of people who have made the definitive weapon of their age, and it's a family shame. His role in this was creating the Metal Gear Rex, something that, according to him, he thought it would be used as purely a defensive technology, when in fact it was something so explosive it could reignite the Cold War. Emma, instead of working on some super mech, some doomsday weapon, the thing her genius went towards was artificial intelligence controlling the dissemination of information. What I think is so interesting about this entire plot element, and they're going to go a lot further with this, and this is just going to get a lot crazier, is people think the prophetic thing about this game is how much AI is part of the plot, how much information warfare is part of the plot, and certainly they read the tea leaves very well with this game, predicting the world we live in now. But I don't believe it's so much a commentary on coming technologies as it is Kojima's commentary that the stand-in for this in the real life, like the West, NATO, the American Empire, whatever you want to call it, it is fully automatic. And in that way, he was ahead of his time in that criticism by a good 10, 20 years. This was, keep in mind, he wrote this when Bush was still shrub. He wrote this before 9/11.
Yep.
Criticisms on the imperial presidency, all this stuff would come later during the global war on terror. But he was, this game that was he started running in the late 90s. was saying that the executive and the American military, NATO, all of this for that matter, is fully automatic. That it doesn't quite matter who is president. They're always going to do these things because, like a sort of self-aware AI, it seeks to self-perpetuate.
I totally agree. And while it's understandable that people perceive this game as trying to forecast, how artificial systems and AI and technology will shape our world in the future and how it might shape our world in the future, it's much more interesting and convincing to me that the game is really saying, as you're arguing, it might as well be an AI that runs these systems.
Yes.
There's not a central human agency to it. Individuals can be swapped out, and the machine keeps running. And it's not that it's indestructible or infallible either, but it is a very sophisticated, robust, automated machine that reproduces itself. And we'll get to 4. I don't think we should spoil exactly what some of the future reveals are about the Patriots and how they actually work. But it's enough at this point to say that he does treat it in a more sophisticated and interesting way than simply going with the trope that, a handful of guys meet in a room and decide everything about the world and everything else is a pageant. That's almost what Johnson tells Raiden, but that's really not the whole story either.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are a lot of games that surprise you with how astute they are. Hitman World of Assassination, that trilogy is one where the Hitman games are very funny, and at least the first few games that came out on PC, they're very over the top, and there's a lot of mad scientist stuff. But that the most recent series of games is very astute in how it crunches down the move from like aristocratic transnational families, like the people that made their fortune either pre-industrialization or during it, the move from the world being managed by those people to sort of Pete Buttigieg types, like middle-class strivers who grew up inside the institutions that were fostered by their predecessors. And it really surprised me, and I really loved those games, and I was really surprised by the narrative and everything. But when you play these games, you see what a big difference it is between a game that has a, pretty surprisingly astute reading on the current world to something like this, where not only was it shockingly prescient, it was so good at also assessing the state of the world during the general period it was written in a way that no one else was doing. I mean that in not just in the sense of games, obviously, because I don't know where else you would have gotten this critique in most popular games. I don't think Ratchet and Clank writing about how, President Ross Perot would have probably gone into Serbia. As good as those games are. But this you didn't see a lot of this in general anywhere at the time.
But is the AI actually capable of controlling everything?
No, GW is only the system's core. It's only for deciding what data is stored or deleted. The actual subsystem for executing the task exists within our social structure.
What?
We're playing these games, we in the week before the episode, we try to play and finish the game at least once. So I'm actually in the middle of Metal Gear Solid 3 while I play this, and the thing that sort of struck me over the head with Metal Gear Solid 3, without revealing too much before we go into our episode with that, is sort of how, I'm not going to say personal, but how intimate a lot of these stories are. And by that, I mean, these first 2 games in the Solid series are about individuals contending against these systems. Whereas most of the games that come after, the prequels, they're about the creation of these systems.
By strong-willed individuals.
Yes. And that there's this sort of funny inherent tragedy in the world of Metal Gear Solid, that incredibly insurmountable seeming systems that we meet in these, in the games starring Solid Snake in some capacity. They were created by incredibly idealistic people who, in a lot of cases, fucking hayseeds, who, due to their due to becoming, elements of either state security agencies, intelligence apparatuses, militaries, saw the rest of the world for the first time. And because they grew up in the 20s and 30s and 40s, it dispelled their notions, their just default notions of isolationism and nationalism, and caused them to want to create this sort of like internationalism, a very innocent internationalism. And so this harshly cynical, automated, insurmountable world was created by these incredibly idealistic people who are more idealistic seeming than anyone we meet in 2 or in any of the contemporary games. Snake, Otacon, all these Xers who I think they do kind of represent initially Kojima's hopes and dreams. That the Xers who start out cynical will discover beliefs through their contention with these systems. And by trying to tear them down and build a new world. And then 2 is sort of, it's Kojima's recognition that the Xers aren't going to do it. And Raiden, who is initially presented to us as emblematic of millennials, even millennials born in 1980, as being soul rendered by screens, living a life that was never not digitized, is his hopes and dreams for the next generation doing it. And I think it's less that he's trying to predict the future. I think it's weirdly personal in a way.
Raiden, you're carrying a PSG-1, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's time to play sniper.